Three women disappeared from a locked house in the middle of the night, leaving behind their purses, their keys, their cars, and absolutely no trace of what happened to them. For 15 years, investigators found nothing. Then a shocking discovery changed everything they thought they knew about the case. June 6, 1992, should have been one of the happiest nights of their lives. 18-year-old Susanna Parker had just graduated from Riverton High School, and the future stretched before her like an open highway. She planned to attend community college in the fall, maybe study nursing like her mother, Cheryl Abbott, who worked at Riverton General Hospital. Susanna's best friend since childhood, Sally Martin, had also graduated that evening. The two girls were inseparable. They'd grown up 3 houses apart on Maple Street, shared secrets, dreams, and now this milestone moment. Sally was planning to work at her father's construction company for a year before deciding on college. The graduation ceremony at Riverton High was everything small-town America was supposed to be. Proud parents filled the gymnasium, cameras flashed, and the class of '92 threw their caps into the air with all the optimism that youth could muster. After the ceremony, Sally and Susanna joined their classmates at Jennifer Walsh's house for the unofficial graduation party. Cheryl Abbott, 40 years old and a single mother who had raised Susanna on her own after her divorce, was working the night shift at the hospital. She trusted her daughter completely. Susanna had never been in serious trouble, never given her reason to worry. The plan was simple. The girls would attend the party, then come back to the Abbott house for a sleepover to celebrate their graduation. Around 11:30 p.m., Sally and Susanna left the party and drove back to the modest 2-story house at 1247 Maple Street. Neighbors later reported seeing lights in the house until approximately midnight. Susanna's car was parked in the driveway, exactly where she'd left it. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The two best friends were probably talking late into the night about their graduation, their futures, maybe the cute boys they danced with at the party. It was supposed to be the beginning of the rest of their lives. Instead, it was the last night anyone would ever see them alive. Cheryl Abbott returned home from her hospital shift at 7:15 a.m. on June 7, expecting to find 2 teenagers sleeping late after their celebration. Instead, she found something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The front door was unlocked, which immediately struck her as odd. Susanna was usually careful about security, especially when Cheryl worked nights. As she entered the house, everything appeared normal at first glance. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken windows. But the silence was wrong. The house felt empty in a way that raised the hair on the back of Cheryl's neck. She called out for Susanna and Sally, then climbed the stairs to Susanna's bedroom. The beds were unmade, but showed no signs of having been slept in. Graduation dresses were hung carefully in the closet. Makeup and jewelry were scattered on the dresser exactly as teenage girls would leave them. By 8:30 a.m., when there was still no sign of the girls, Cheryl called Sally's parents, David and Linda Martin. They hadn't heard from Sally either, and she was supposed to be home by now. David Martin immediately drove over to the Abbott house. What they discovered next made the mystery even more baffling. Both girls' purses were on the kitchen counter, wallets intact with cash and credit cards untouched. Car keys hung on the hook by the door. Susanna's car sat in the driveway with no signs of disturbance. Most puzzling of all, there were 3 coffee cups in the sink, not 2, but 3. Someone else had been in that house with Sally and Susanna. But who and where had all 3 of them gone? At 9:45 a.m., David Martin called the Riverton Police Department. Within an hour, Detective Robert Hayes was standing in the Abbott kitchen, looking at a crime scene that defied all logical explanation. 2 18-year-old girls had simply vanished into thin air, along with Cheryl Abbott, who should have been at work but whose whereabouts the night before suddenly became crucial to understanding what had happened. Detective Hay had investigated hundreds of missing persons cases, but he'd never seen anything like the scene at 1247 Maple Street. The house told a story that made no sense. In the living room, the television was still on, tuned to a late-night movie that would have ended around 2 a.m. 3 glasses sat on the coffee table, 2 with soda, 1 with water. A bowl of popcorn was half empty, as if someone had interrupted a casual evening at home. The strange details began to accumulate. The back door was not only unlocked but slightly ajar, though there were no footprints in the soft soil of the garden beyond. A porch light that the neighbors swore had been working the night before was found with its bulb broken, glass fragments scattered on the wooden deck. Most disturbing was a small stain on the living room carpet near the couch. It was roughly the size of a dinner plate, dark reddish-brown, and appeared to be blood, but preliminary tests would later prove inconclusive. The stain was too degraded to provide DNA evidence or even confirm it was human blood. Detective Hayes interviewed the neighbors, but their accounts only deepened the mystery. Mrs. Patterson, who lived directly across the street, reported seeing car headlights in the Abbott driveway around 2:30 a.m. But when she looked out her window, she saw only Susanna's car, exactly where it had been parked all evening. Mr. Chen, who lived next door, thought he heard voices in the backyard around 3 a.m., but couldn't make out any words. He assumed it was just the girls talking and didn't investigate. The most chilling detail came from the Riverton hospital. Cheryl Abbott had been scheduled to work the night shift on June 6, but she'd called in sick at 9 p.m. after the graduation ceremony, but before the girls came home. The hospital's supervisor remembered the call clearly because Cheryl had never missed work without advance notice. This meant Cheryl had been home when Sally and Susanna returned from the party. She should have been the third person drinking coffee and watching the late-night movie. But where was she now? The investigation was about to take a turn that would shock everyone involved. By noon on June 7th, word of the disappearances had spread through Riverton like wildfire. This quiet town of 15,000 people had never experienced anything like it. 3 women had vanished from a locked house without a trace, and nobody had any idea what had happened. Detective Hayes called for backup from the state police and FBI. The house became a full crime scene, with investigators photographing every inch, dusting for fingerprints, and searching for DNA evidence. But the results were frustratingly normal. Only the fingerprints and DNA of the Abbott family and Sally Martin. Exactly what you'd expect to find. The search expanded beyond the house. Volunteer searchers combed Riverside Park, where Sally and Susanna used to play as children. Divers explored the river that ran behind the town. Search dogs were brought in, but they lost the scent at the Abbott driveway, as if the 3 women had simply evaporated. The FBI interviewed everyone who had been at the graduation party, looking for anyone who might have followed the girls home. They investigated Cheryl's coworkers, her ex-husband, and anyone who might have had reason to target the family. Every lead led nowhere, but it was the discovery in Cheryl's bedroom that provided the first real clue about what might have happened. Hidden under her mattress, investigators found $15,000 in cash and a .38 caliber revolver that wasn't registered to her. The gun had been fired recently, though no spent shell casings were found in the house. Cheryl's bank records revealed something equally puzzling. Over the past 6 months, she had withdrawn nearly $30,000 from her savings account in small amounts that wouldn't trigger bank reporting requirements. For a single mother working as a hospital aide, this represented her entire life savings. Phone records showed that, in the weeks before the disappearance, Cheryl had received numerous calls from a blocked number, always late at night after her shifts. The calls typically lasted less than 2 minutes, suggesting brief, urgent conversations. Detective Hayes began to suspect that Cheryl Abbott hadn't been an innocent victim. She might have been involved in something dangerous that had ultimately cost all 3 women their lives. But what could a small-town hospital worker possibly be involved in that would lead to such an elaborate disappearance? The investigation into Cheryl Abbott's background revealed a woman living a double life that shocked everyone who thought they knew her. To her coworkers and neighbors, she was a devoted single mother who worked extra shifts to provide for her daughter. But the evidence suggested something much more complicated. FBI financial analysts discovered that Cheryl had been making regular deposits to an account in the Cayman Islands, deposits that far exceeded her legitimate income from the hospital. Over the past 2 years, she had moved more than $200,000 through various offshore accounts, using sophisticated money laundering techniques. The source of the money became clear when investigators examined her work schedule more closely. Cheryl had been working the night shift in the hospital's pharmacy, where she had access to controlled substances including morphine, oxycodone, and fentanyl. Drug Enforcement Administration records showed that the hospital had been reporting shortages of these medications for months. Detective Hayes coordinated with narcotics officers who had been investigating a drug distribution network operating throughout the Midwest. The network was suspected of stealing pharmaceutical from hospitals and medical facilities, then selling them on the black market for enormous profits. Phone records and financial transactions suggested that Cheryl had been the inside person at Riverton General Hospital, stealing drugs and selling them to distributors, who then moved them to major cities like Chicago and Detroit. The mysterious late-night phone calls had been coordination calls with her criminal contacts, but something had gone wrong on the night of June 6th. The timing of the disappearance, just as investigators were closing in on the drug network, suggested that Cheryl had been preparing to run. The cash hidden in her bedroom, the withdrawn savings, the call to skip work, she had been planning to disappear. The question was, had she taken Sally and Susanna with her voluntarily, or had something gone terribly wrong when her criminal associates came to collect? A breakthrough came when investigators identified the blocked number that had been calling Cheryl. It belonged to Marcus Webb, a known drug dealer with connections to organized crime families in Detroit. Webb had disappeared around the same time as the three women, and his associates claimed they hadn't seen him since early June 1992. Marcus Webb wasn't just any drug dealer. He was a key figure in a criminal organization that the FBI had been tracking for years. His operations stretched from Detroit to smaller cities across the Midwest, using corrupt hospital employees to steal prescription drugs that were then sold on the street for massive profits. Cheryl Abbott had been one of several hospital workers feeding drugs to Webb's network, but she had become his most valuable asset. Riverton General Hospital was small enough to avoid intense scrutiny, but large enough to provide a steady supply of high-value pharmaceuticals. However, FBI wiretaps on other members of the network revealed that Cheryl had been getting greedy. She had been skimming drugs from her deliveries to Webb and selling them independently to local dealers. In the criminal world, this kind of double-crossing was often punishable by death. The wiretaps also revealed something that chilled investigators. Webb had been planning to clean house in early June 1992, eliminating loose ends before law enforcement could build cases against his network. Cheryl Abbott was at the top of his cleanup list. Detective Hayes theorized that Webb had come to the Abbott house on the night of June 6th, possibly to kill Cheryl for her betrayal. But he had arrived to find not just Cheryl, but also Sally and Susanna, the 3 coffee cups, the half-eaten popcorn, the late-night movie. They painted a picture of Webb interrupting what should have been a simple celebration between friends. What happened next was a matter of speculation, but the evidence suggested a violent confrontation. The blood stain on the carpet, the broken porch light, the fired gun found under Cheryl's mattress. Someone had been killed in that house, and the other 2 had been taken elsewhere. The FBI issued arrest warrants for Marcus Webb and several associates, but Webb had vanished as completely as the 3 women. His Detroit apartment was abandoned. His known associates claimed ignorance, and his network had shut down operations across 4 states. For months, investigators followed leads across the country, chasing rumors that Webb had been seen in Florida, Texas, or Mexico, but every sighting proved to be false and the trail went cold. The case was classified as a triple homicide. Though no bodies had been found, the families held memorial services, but there was no closure, no justice, and no answers to the question that haunted everyone. What had really happened in that house on June 6, 1992? The disappearance of Sally Martin, Susanna Parker, and Cheryl Abbott became one of the most famous unsolved cases in Indiana history. Over the years, dozens of investigators worked the case, following hundreds of leads that all ended in disappointment. Psychics offered their services, claiming to see visions of the women in various locations. Witnesses called police, claiming to have seen the missing women in other states, living under assumed names. None of these leads proved credible, but they gave false hope to families who refused to give up. David Martin, Sally's father, became the public face of the search. He appeared on television shows, distributed flyers at truck stops across the country, and offered a reward that eventually reached $100,000 for information, leading to the discovery of the three women. "I know my daughter is out there somewhere," he said during a 2005 interview. "Maybe she can't come home, maybe she's being held against her will, but I'll never stop looking for her." The house at 1247 Maple Street became a symbol of the unsolved mystery. Cheryl's ex-husband eventually sold it, but rumors persisted that it was haunted by the spirits of the missing women. New owners reported strange noises, unexplained shadows, and the persistent smell of coffee at all hours of the day and night. Detective Hayes retired in 2003, but he never stopped working the case. His garage was filled with boxes of evidence, witness statements, and theories about what might have happened. He had become obsessed with finding the truth, even if it destroyed his marriage and consumed his retirement. Cold case investigators periodically reviewed the evidence, applying new forensic techniques as they became available. DNA testing of the carpet stain remained inconclusive. Enhanced analysis of the crime scene photos revealed no new clues. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved forever. Then in 2007, everything changed. Marcus Webb had been living under the name Michael Wilson in Tucson, Arizona for 15 years. He owned a small auto repair shop, paid his taxes, and had convinced everyone around him that he was a reformed man trying to live quietly after youthful mistakes. But Webb's past caught up with him when a routine traffic stop revealed outstanding warrants in his real name. DNA evidence linked him to multiple crimes, including the drug network that had employed Cheryl Abbott. Facing life in prison without parole, Webb finally agreed to cooperate with authorities. What he told FBI agents was more shocking than anyone had imagined. Webb confirmed that he had gone to the Abbott house on June 6, 1992, intending to confront Cheryl about her theft from his drug operation. But when he arrived around 2:30 a.m., he found a scene that even he, a hardened criminal, hadn't expected. Cheryl was already dead when I got there, Webb told investigators. She'd been shot in the chest, lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. The two girls were sitting on the couch, scared out of their minds, covered in blood spatter. According to Webb's confession, Cheryl Abbott hadn't been killed by criminals. She'd been shot by her own daughter. Webb claimed that Susanna had discovered her mother's drug-dealing operation earlier that evening and confronted her when she came home from the graduation party. The argument escalated, and when Cheryl pulled a gun to threaten her daughter, Susanna had grabbed it during the struggle. The gun went off, killing Cheryl instantly. The girl was in complete shock. Webb said she and her friend were just sitting there, not knowing what to do. They'd called me because Cheryl had my number written down, and they were desperate for help. Webb's story explained the crime scene detail that had puzzled investigators for years. The 3 coffee cups were from when Webb sat with the girls, trying to figure out what to do. The broken porch light had been damaged when he carried Cheryl's body outside. The blood stain was where she had fallen after being shot. But Webb's account raised an even more disturbing question. If Susanna had killed her mother accidentally, and Sally was just an innocent witness, what had Webb done with the 2 teenagers? Marcus Webb's complete confession revealed a crime more complex and tragic than anyone had imagined. According to his account, he had arrived at a scene where an accidental shooting had already occurred, and 2 terrified teenagers were begging him for help. "I told them we could call the police. Let them explain what happened," Webb said during his confession. But Cheryl's daughter was panicking, saying nobody would believe it was an accident. "She begged me to help them disappear." Webb claimed that Susanna was convinced she would be charged with murder, and Sally was terrified of being accused as an accomplice. Both girls pleaded with him to help them start new lives somewhere else, away from the investigation they were sure would destroy them. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Webb continued. I thought I could help them. I had connections, people who could create new identities. I told them I could get them out of the country, set them up somewhere safe. According to Webb's confession, he helped the girls bury Cheryl's body in a remote location, then drove them to Detroit, where associates in his criminal network provided false documents and transportation. Sally and Susanna were supposedly taken to Mexico, then eventually to South America, where they were given new identities and enough money to start over. But investigators quickly realized there were serious problems with Webb's story. Financial records showed no large cash withdrawals that would have been necessary to fund such an elaborate escape plan. None of Webb's known associates remembered helping two teenage girls, and several were serving prison sentences that made them willing to cooperate with authorities. Most damning was Webb's inability to provide specific details about where Sally and Susanna had been taken, or what names they were living under. When pressed for information that could verify their survival, Webb became evasive and claimed his memory was unclear after 15 years. The truth, investigators concluded, was likely much simpler and more tragic. Webb had probably killed both girls to eliminate witnesses to his presence at the crime scene, then disposed of their bodies along with Cheryl's in a location that has never been discovered. In 2008, Marcus Webb was convicted of the murders of Cheryl Abbott, Sally Martin, and Susanna Parker, despite the fact that their bodies were never found. The jury rejected his story about helping the girls escape, instead believing the prosecution's theory that he had killed all three women to protect his drug operation. Webb was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died in 2015, taking the location of the bodies to his grave and leaving the families without the closure they had sought for over 2 decades. The investigation officially closed with Webb's conviction, but questions remained. Had Susanna really killed her mother accidentally, or was that part of Webb's lies? Were Sally and Susanna actually innocent victims, or had they been more involved in Cheryl's criminal activities than anyone knew? David Martin never stopped believing his daughter might be alive somewhere. Until I see a body, there's still hope, he said after Webb's conviction. Maybe she's out there, afraid to come home because she thinks we'll be angry. I just want her to know that we love her and we're waiting. The house at 1247 Maple Street was eventually demolished in 2010. A small park now occupies the lot, with a memorial bench dedicated to the 3 missing women. But locals still call it the Ghost Lot, and children dare each other to walk through it after dark. Detective Hayes, now in his 80s, occasionally drives by the memorial. He solved hundreds of cases during his career, but the Riverton 3 remain his greatest failure and his deepest obsession. I keep thinking there's something we missed, he said in a recent interview. Some clue that would tell us what really happened that night. 3 women don't just vanish without a trace, not even in a case like this. Today, more than 30 years after that graduation night in 1992, the disappearance of Sally Martin, Susanna Parker, and Cheryl Abbott remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American crime history. Despite Marcus Webb's conviction, many investigators believe the truth died with him. The elaborate story about helping the girls escape was almost certainly a lie, but his knowledge of crime scene details proved he was definitely involved in their disappearances. The case changed how law enforcement investigates missing persons cases, particularly when financial crimes might be involved. The sophisticated money laundering operation Cheryl had been running was far more complex than anyone initially realized, highlighting how even small-town criminals could be connected to national and international networks. Sally's father, David Martin, passed away in 2019, never learning what happened to his daughter. His last words to investigators were a plea: don't let them be forgotten. Keep looking. Somebody somewhere knows the truth. The case has been featured in numerous documentaries, podcasts, and true crime television shows. Each new generation of investigators reviews the evidence, hoping that advancing technology might reveal clues that were invisible 30 years ago. DNA testing continues on evidence from the house, though the degraded samples have yielded no new information. Geographic profiling and behavioral analysis have suggested possible locations where the bodies might be buried, but extensive searches have found nothing. The memorial bench in the small park that replaced the Abbott house bears a simple inscription: Sally, Susanna, and Cheryl, gone but never forgotten. Flowers appear there regularly, left by people who never knew the three women but have been touched by their story. The disappearance of the Riverton Three serves as a reminder that some mysteries may never be solved, that some families may never find closure, and that evil sometimes succeeds in hiding its tracks so well that truth becomes impossible to uncover. But their story also demonstrates the power of love and determination. For 30 years, people have refused to let Sally, Susanna, and Cheryl be forgotten. Their memory lives on in the investigators who still work the case, the family members who still hope for answers, and the community that still mourns their loss. Three women vanished on a night that should have been filled with celebration and dreams of the future. Instead, it became a nightmare that has haunted everyone it touched. The truth may be buried somewhere, waiting to be discovered, or it may have died with Marcus Webb, lost forever in the silence of the grave. In the end, the case of the Riverton Three reminds us that real life is often more mysterious and tragic than any work of fiction. Sometimes people simply vanish, leaving behind only questions, theories, and the endless ache of not knowing. And sometimes, that not knowing is the most terrible fate of all. Share your thoughts on the comments section, and do not forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to SELECTA Stories for my mysterious stories.